Captain James Reed stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station Alpha, hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the digital display before him. The holographic blueprints rotated slowly in the air, showing a vessel unlike any in the current Earth Defense Coalition fleet. The ship's design was elegant yet formidable, with lines that seemed to blend art and war into something almost alive. "You've been staring at those plans for 3 hours, Jim," said Commander Wilson, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Reed. "Find anything new?" Reed accepted the coffee without taking his eyes off the display. "Every time I look, I see something I missed before. This ship wasn't just ahead of its time, Tom. It was impossible for its time. The HMS Thunderchild had been designed 150 years ago by Professor Alexander Morris, a brilliant engineer whose ideas were dismissed as fantasy by his contemporaries. The blueprints had been filed away in a forgotten archive until Reed stumbled upon them during research for his doctoral thesis on historical naval architecture. "The military board meeting is tomorrow," Wilson reminded him. "You'll need more than enthusiasm to convince them to resurrect a 150-year-old failed project." Reed took a sip of his coffee and smiled. "Failed? No, this project never failed because it never truly began. They couldn't build it then. We can build it now." Later that evening, Reed pored over the technical specifications in his quarters. The Thunderchild incorporated principles of energy distribution and hull design that modern physics had only recently confirmed. Morris had somehow understood concepts that wouldn't be proven for more than a century after his death. Reed's communication panel chimed. Admiral Parker's stern face appeared on screen. "Captain Reed, I've reviewed your proposal. The Coalition doesn't have resources to waste on historical curiosities." "Sir, with respect, the Thunderchild isn't a curiosity. It's a breakthrough waiting to happen." Reed leaned forward. "Modern materials science can finally realize what Morris envisioned. The ship's hull design would make it nearly invisible to standard tracking systems. And where would you get the crew for this project?" The Admiral's skepticism was evident. "I've compiled a list. Engineers and officers who think differently," Reed replied, transmitting the file. "People who see possibilities where others see problems." The Admiral's eyes narrowed as he scanned the names. Half these people have disciplinary marks in their files for questioning outdated protocols or suggesting improvements deemed too radical. Reed countered. "Exactly the kind of minds we need." The next morning, Reed faced the Coalition Defense Board, 12 stern faces evaluating him from behind a curved table. His presentation was concise, focusing on how Morris's design addressed vulnerabilities in current fleet vessels. "The cost alone makes this project untenable," General Matthews declared after Reed finished. "More costly than losing ships to enemies who can outmaneuver us." Reed asked quietly. "The Thunderchild can be built for less than 2 standard destroyers, but would provide capabilities we currently don't have." Admiral Parker, surprisingly, spoke up. "Captain Reed's team evaluation checks out. These individuals, while unorthodox, have exceptional records in their fields." The debate continued for hours. Reed stood firm, answering each objection with data and reasoned arguments. As the meeting concluded, he could see minds beginning to change. 3 days later, Reed received the authorization. The project was classified top priority, with resources allocated for immediate start. His first call was to engineer Lily Barnes, whose theories on reactive hull plating had earned her both acclaim and criticism. "We're building the Thunderchild," he told her without preamble. "Can you be at Orbital Station Alpha by Friday?" Her eyes widened. "The Morris design. You actually got approval?" Reed nodded. "We have 18 months to turn a legend into reality." Barnes smiled. "I'll be there tomorrow." As Reed ended the call, he turned back to the blueprints. Soon, the impossible ship would take form among the stars, and history would remember the visionary who had designed it a century and a half too early. The orbital shipyard hummed with activity as construction pods swarmed around the skeletal frame of the Thunderchild. 6 months into the project, the ship was beginning to take shape. The central spine stretched nearly 500 meters, with modular sections branching outward in a pattern that seemed random to untrained eyes, but followed precise mathematical principles designed to scatter sensor signals. Engineer Lily Barnes floated next to a partially assembled hull section, her tablet displaying the original Morris blueprints alongside modern modifications. The old man was a genius, she muttered to herself, tapping a section of the plans. He designed adaptive power conduits before we even had reliable fusion reactors. Talking to yourself again? Reed asked, maneuvering alongside her in his zero-gravity suit. Barnes didn't look up. Look at this power distribution network. It's almost like he knew what materials we have available now. The reactive metal alloys we're using weren't even theorized in his time. Reed studied the section she indicated. Could he have been copying something he saw? Maybe reverse engineering. From what? Nothing like this existed then or now. Barnes shook her head. It's as if he could see the future. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from Reed's communicator. Captain, we have visitors, came the voice of Security Chief Daniels. Coalition Oversight Committee just docked. They want an immediate tour. Reed sighed. This is the third inspection in 2 months. Tell them I'll meet them at Airlock 7. The committee consisted of 4 stern-faced officials who made little effort to hide their skepticism. Leading them was General Matthews, who had opposed the project from the beginning. Impressive framework, Captain, Matthews said as they moved through the construction bay. But we're hearing rumors about system integration failures. Reed maintained his composure. Not failures, General. Challenges. We're implementing theoretical systems that have never been built before. The Coalition has authorized unprecedented resources for this project, a civilian official interjected. The Defense Minister is questioning the lack of tangible results. I wasn't aware the Defense Minister expected a fully functional revolutionary warship in 6 months, Reed replied. We're on schedule. As they continued the tour, an alarm blared through the station. Barnes's voice came over the comm. Captain, we're initiating power test on grid section 3. You might want to see this. Reed led the committee to the observation deck overlooking the main construction area. Below, technicians were gathered around a segment of the ship's core systems. What exactly are we looking at? Matthews demanded. Reed activated a display screen. The Thunderchild's primary power distribution system. According to conventional physics, it should be impossible to channel this much energy through conduits of this size without meltdown. Barnes gave a signal, and the system hummed to life. Energy readings spiked on the monitors, climbing far beyond safe parameters for standard designs. The committee members leaned forward, expressions shifting from skepticism to astonishment as the system stabilized at levels that defied current engineering limits. How is this possible? One official whispered. Morris designed power conduits that don't just channel energy, they amplify it, Reed explained. The material composition creates a resonance effect that actually boosts the output. General Matthews studied the readings carefully. If these numbers are accurate, this ship would have more than twice the power efficiency of our most advanced vessels. These numbers are just the beginning, Reed said confidently. We're only at 30% capacity. Later, after the committee departed with considerably less skepticism than they'd arrived with, Reed joined his core team in the makeshift recreation area they'd established. The look on Matthew's face was worth every headache they've given us. Barnes laughed, passing Reed a cup of coffee. Chief Engineer Rodriguez nodded. Wait until they see the propulsion system next month. Morris's inertial dampeners will make everything we have look like ancient rocket technology. Reed gazed through the viewport at the growing shape of the Thunderchild. We're on schedule. But the real question remains, why did Morris design this? What did he see coming that made him create a warship generations beyond his time? The team fell silent, considering the question that had haunted the project from the beginning. Outside, construction pods continued their work, building a legend that had waited 150 years to be born. The message came without warning. During a routine deep space scan, Earth's furthest monitoring station detected an approaching fleet of unknown vessels. Within hours, every government on the planet received the same transmission. A series of mathematical equations followed by visual representations of bipedal beings with elongated limbs and ridged cranial structures. The Voras had made first contact. Initial excitement quickly turned to concern as xenolinguists deciphered more of the alien language. The Voras weren't explorers. They were empire builders with a clear hierarchy that placed other species in subordinate positions. Their diplomatic overtures contained thinly veiled assessments of Earth's military capabilities and resource wealth. "They're taking our measure," Reed told his crew as they gathered in the Thunderchild's partially completed command center. Coalition intelligence believes they'd done this before with other worlds. Barnes studied the reports on her tablet. The ship designs in these transmissions. They are using gravitational manipulation technologies similar to what Morris theorized. How is that possible? That's the question that keeps me up at night, Reed admitted. Morris might have had contact with them, or at least knowledge of them, a century and a half ago. A week later, the first border incident occurred. A Vora's scout ship disabled an Earth research vessel near Jupiter's orbit, claiming territorial violations. The crew was returned unharmed, but with a clear message: the outer solar system now belonged to the Vora's empire. Earth's response was diplomatic but firm, dispatching a small defense fleet to establish a presence at the contested boundary. The confrontation was brief and devastating. 3 Earth vessels destroyed, the remaining 2 limping back with tails of weapons that seemed to bend space itself. In an emergency session, the Coalition Defense Board authorized accelerated completion of the Thunderchild. Reed was given additional resources, but an impossible deadline: 60 days to make the ship combat ready. "We can't do it," Rodriguez protested in the privacy of Reed's office. "The drive systems alone need 3 months of calibration." "We don't have 3 months," Reed replied, displaying footage from the Jupiter engagement. "Look at their targeting systems. They lock onto standard hull configurations instantly, but they struggled with the research vessel's irregular shape. The Thunderchild's design could be our only advantage." The next few weeks became a blur of endless work shifts. Sleep-deprived engineers modified systems on the fly, making educated guesses where testing would normally be required. Military personnel trained on simulators while their actual stations were still being assembled around them. Reed barely left the construction site, catching brief moments of rest in his temporary quarters with Morris's original journals open beside him. He found himself searching for hints, any indication that Morris had foreseen this conflict. One entry caught his attention. "The visitors came again last night in my dreams. Their ships move like nothing I have imagined, defying the laws of motion as we understand them. I must find a way to match them, to surprise them with their own principles turned against them." Before Reed could delve deeper, alarms blared throughout the station. He rushed to the command center where a grim-faced communications officer reported, "Vora's fleet has pushed past our defensive line. They've established positions in Mars orbit." The Coalition Admiral's face appeared on the main screen. "Captain Reed, what's the status of the Thunderchild?" Reed hesitated, looking at the readiness reports on his console. "We've installed the primary weapon systems, sir, but the targeting computers are still being calibrated. Life support is functional. Propulsion is at 80%. "That will have to do," the Admiral replied. "The Voras have issued an ultimatum. Earth acknowledges their sovereignty, or they begin targeting orbital installations. You launch in 12 hours. As the transmission ended, Reed turned to his exhausted crew. "I know the ship isn't ready. I know we aren't ready. But sometimes history doesn't wait for readiness." Barnes stepped forward. "Morris designed this ship to face this exact enemy. Whether he knew it from dreams or something more, he built our advantage into every system." Reed nodded and activated the shipwide comm. "All personnel, prepare for emergency launch procedures. The Thunderchild is going to war. The Thunderchild slipped from its construction cradle with a grace that belied its massive size. Construction pods and utility vehicles scattered as the great ship oriented itself, its unfinished sections covered by temporary plating. In the command center, Reed stood behind the helm station, watching as Officer Mike Taylor coaxed the untested systems to life. "Primary drive online," Taylor reported, his voice tight with concentration. "Stabilization thrusters responding, but the calibration is off by 12%. Reed gripped the back of Taylor's chair. "Can we make the jump to Mars orbit?" "If we don't mind arriving slightly sideways," Taylor replied with a nervous laugh. Barnes monitored the ship's power systems from her station. "Captain, the reactor is fluctuating. Morris's design called for a specific power curve during initial startup, but we've had to bypass several regulatory systems." "Will it hold?" Reed asked simply. Barnes hesitated. "It should. Theoretically." The Thunderchild accelerated away from Earth, its revolutionary drive system engaging with a vibration that ran through the entire vessel. The bridge crew exchanged concerned glances as unusual harmonics echoed through the hull. "That doesn't sound right," Rodriguez muttered from the engineering station. Morris noted similar resonance patterns in his journals, Reed assured them. "The hull is designed to channel those vibrations into the defensive systems." The trip to Mars took less than an hour, a journey that would have required days for conventional ships. As they approached the red planet, the tactical display lit up with Vorus positions. "7 enemy vessels detected," reported Tactical Officer Lin. "Configuration matches the ships that destroyed our defense fleet. They're altering course to intercept." Reed studied the display. "Hold position at extreme weapons range. Let's see how they react to us." The Vor's response was immediate. 3 ships broke formation, accelerating toward the Thunderchild with weapons charge. Targeting signals swept across the Earth vessel's hull. "They're having trouble getting a lock," Lin observed with surprise. "Their targeting beams keep sliding off our hull geometry." Reed allowed himself a small smile. Morris understood this. The irregular angles and material composition disrupt their targeting systems. He turned to Taylor. "Bring us around on a spiral approach. Keep changing our aspect ratio." The Thunderchild moved in a pattern that seemed erratic, but followed precise mathematical formulas from Morris's design. On the tactical display, the Vorus ships adjusted repeatedly, struggling to maintain weapons lock. "They're firing," Lin shouted. Energy beams lanced through space toward the Thunderchild. Several missed entirely, while others glanced off the hull at oblique angles. The ship shuddered but maintained its course. "Hull integrity at 92%, Barnes reported. "The reactive plating is distributing the energy just as Morris predicted." Reed leaned forward. "Weapons status." "Main cannon charged, but targeting systems are only at 60% efficiency," Lin answered. "Target their lead vessel, widest dispersal pattern," Reed ordered. "Fire when ready." The Thunderchild's main weapon discharged, not as a single beam, but as a cascading wave of energy that spread outward before reconverging on the target. The Vorus ship attempted evasive maneuvers but couldn't predict the unusual attack pattern. The energy wave enveloped it, overwhelming its shields. "Direct hit," Lin announced as the enemy vessel's lights flickered and died. "Their drive system is offline." The remaining Vorus ships regrouped, adjusting their formation to surround the Thunderchild. Their next attack came from multiple angles simultaneously. "Evasive action," Reed commanded. "Implementation pattern Morris 7. Taylor looked up in confusion. "Sir, that sequence wasn't in the training simulations." "It's in Morris's original notes," Reed said quickly. "Hard acceleration, 90-degree turn, then full reverse thrust while rotating on all axes." The maneuver should have torn a normal ship apart, but the Thunderchild's inertial systems compensated, allowing it to move in ways the Vorus clearly hadn't anticipated. Their coordinated attack broke apart as they struggled to track the Earth vessel's impossible movements. "We've opened a gap," Lin reported. Two Vorus ships collided trying to adjust to our course change. Reed watched as the confused Vorus fleet attempted to regroup. Send a transmission to Earth Command. Tell them the Thunderchild has engaged the enemy and is drawing their fleet away from Mars. And add this: Morris was right about everything. As the message transmitted, Reed studied the enemy movements. They were adapting, learning, but for now, the legend had bought Earth precious time. Word of the Thunderchild's first victory spread quickly through Earth's remaining forces. What had been intended as a single desperate engagement evolved into a series of strategic strikes as Reed and his crew refined their understanding of the ship's capabilities. With each encounter, they pushed Morris's design further, discovering features that even the ship's builders hadn't fully understood. 3 weeks after their first battle, the Thunderchild led a small group of retrofitted Earth vessels in an assault on a Vorus supply depot near Europa. The Earth ships had been hastily modified with simplified versions of the Thunderchild's hull geometry, making them harder to target, though lacking the flagship's more advanced systems. The Vorus are adapting, Reed observed as he studied sensor readings in the command center. They've modified their targeting arrays to compensate for our hull design. Barnes nodded, but they can't duplicate our power distribution system. Their weapons still can't maintain full strength against our defenses. The tactical display showed a dozen Vorus ships moving to intercept their position. Unlike previous formations, these ships maintained unusual distances from each other, creating a web-like pattern. They're learning, Lynn said grimly. That formation is designed to catch us, no matter which way we maneuver. Reed studied the pattern. Send to all Earth vessels, scatter formation, individual jump points as planned. The Thunderchild will engage the center of their formation. As the smaller ships broke away, the Thunderchild accelerated directly toward the heart of the Vorus fleet. Enemy commanders, having witnessed the Earth flagship's previous tactics, anticipated another erratic approach. Instead, Reed ordered a straightforward charge. "Sir, they're targeting our propulsion systems," Lynn warned. "Just as expected," Reed replied calmly. "Activate the Morris shield." This feature, only recently discovered in a subroutine buried in the ship's computers, created a spatial distortion around the Thunderchild. As Vorus weapons fire converged on the ship, the energy seemed to curve around it, much of it redirecting harmlessly into space. The Vorus fleet broke formation, unprepared for a direct assault from a ship they couldn't effectively target. The Thunderchild carved through their lines, weapons firing in precise sequences that confused enemy tracking systems. In the aftermath, as damage control teams repaired minor systems, Reed received a transmission from Earth Command. "The Vorus are calling it a demon ship," Admiral Parker informed him. "Their communications refer to the Thunderchild as the ghost that cannot be touched. Their frontline vessels are hesitating to engage you directly. Psychological warfare wasn't part of our mission parameters," Reed noted. "It is now," Parker replied. "We're accelerating production of ships incorporating Morris's principles. Meanwhile, we need the Vorus to believe the Thunderchild is more dangerous than it actually is." The next month saw the Thunderchild appearing at seemingly impossible locations, striking Vorus positions and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Reed pushed his crew and the ship to their limits, operating on minimal rest cycles and conducting repairs during brief jumps between targets. After a particularly daring raid on a Vorus command center, Reed found Barnes in the ship's observation lounge, staring at the stars. "The structural integrity field is holding at 87%, she reported without turning. "But we can't keep this pace much longer without a proper maintenance cycle." Reed joined her at the viewport. "The legend is becoming larger than the ship itself. Vorus commanders are refusing assignments to sectors where we've been spotted." "I've been studying more of Morris's journals," Barnes said, changing the subject. "There's a recurring theme I didn't notice before. He mentions the sleeping system repeatedly in his later entries." Reed frowned. "Another feature we haven't discovered. I think it's more significant than that." Barnes turned to face him. I think there's an entire secondary system built into this ship that hasn't been activated yet. Before Reed could respond, the tactical alert sounded. Lynn's voice came over the comm. Captain to the bridge. Voris fleet detected. Largest concentration yet. They're calling for the surrender of the ghost ship by name. Reed exchanged a glance with Barnes. It seems they're tired of being haunted, he said quietly. Let's give them a proper ghost story. Reed gripped the edge of the command console as the Thunderchild shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed across every station on the bridge. The ship had just survived its most punishing battle, yet against a Vora's battle group specifically equipped to counter their advantages. Hull breach on Deck 14, Rodriguez reported, his voice strained. Emergency bulkheads holding but structural integrity is down to 42% in the aft sections. Lynn wiped blood from a cut above her eye. 2 enemy destroyers confirmed destroyed, 1 command vessel disabled. The remaining 4 ships are regrouping for another attack. Reed studied the tactical display. The Thunderchild had performed admirably against overwhelming odds, but this time the Voras had come prepared. Their weapons had been modified to penetrate the Morris shield, and their formations had neutralized many of the Earth ship's maneuverability advantages. We can't withstand another direct engagement, Barnes warned, her fingers dancing across her console as she rerouted power to critical systems. The primary power conduits to the main drive are failing. Reed made a quick decision. Navigation. Plot a course to the asteroid field in Sector 7. Maximum speed. The Thunderchild limped away from the battle, pursued by the remaining Voris ships. As they reached the dense asteroid field, Reed ordered the ship to power down all non-essential systems and drift between the massive rocks. They're still tracking us, Lynn reported, but the mineral content in these asteroids is interfering with their sensors. For 6 tense hours, the crew worked frantically to repair critical systems while hiding among the asteroids. In the main engineering bay, Reed found Barnes inside an access tunnel, surrounded by exposed circuitry. I found something, she said without preamble. Remember the sleeping system I mentioned? I think this is part of it. Reed crouched beside her. The circuitry she had uncovered didn't match any of the ship's schematics. The components were connected to the main power grid, but isolated by a series of regulators that had prevented them from activating. Morris built an entirely separate system within the primary one, Barnes explained. It's been dormant because it requires a specific power configuration we've never attempted. Reed studied the unusual components. Could this be what gives the ship its full potential? Or it could overload every system and destroy us? Barnes replied honestly. But given our current situation, I'm not sure we have much to lose. Rodriguez joined them, examining the circuitry with a professional eye. These connections, they're not human engineering. The materials are similar to what we've seen in salvaged Voris technology. Reed's mind raced. Morris didn't just predict the future. He had access to their technology somehow. He built this ship to fight them specifically. The tactical alert sounded again. Lynn's voice came over the comm. Captain, they found us. 4 Voris ships on approach. Weapons charge. Reed looked at Barnes. How quickly can you activate this system? I can reroute the power now, but I have no idea what it will do, she warned. Do it, Reed ordered, heading back to the bridge. As he took his command position, the tactical display showed the Voris ships surrounding their position. The Thunderchild drifted, seemingly helpless. They're hailing us, Lynn reported with surprise. They're demanding our surrender. They want the ship intact. Reed allowed himself a grim smile. They figured out there's something special about the Thunderchild. They want to study it. He opened a channel. This is Captain James Reed. We require time to prepare our surrender. The response was immediate. You have 10 minutes to power down all systems and prepare for boarding. Reed closed the channel and contacted engineering. Barnes, how close are you? Ready on your mark, she replied. But Captain, I found something else. There are coordinates embedded in this system, specific spatial coordinates far outside our solar system. Reed considered this new information a destination Morris intended for this ship, or the home of whoever gave him this technology, Barnes suggested. The ship's lights dimmed suddenly, then brightened as power surged through previously dormant systems. New displays activated on the bridge, showing configurations and capabilities no one had seen before. "What's happening?" Reed demanded. Barnes's voice was filled with wonder. "The sleeping system is waking up, Captain. And I think the Thunderchild is about to show us what it was really built for." Outside, the Vorus ships tightened their formation, unaware that the wounded prey they thought they had cornered was transforming into something else entirely. The transformation began at the ship's core and radiated outward. Systems that had been dormant suddenly hummed with energy. The bridge displays showed unfamiliar icons and readouts as the ship's hull rippled with waves of energy that changed its very composition. "The molecular structure of the outer hull is reshaping itself," Barnes reported with awe in her voice as she rushed onto the bridge. "The metal is becoming more crystalline, creating perfect geometric patterns at the atomic level." Outside, the Vorus boarding ships approached cautiously. Their scans swept repeatedly over the Thunderchild as its signature changed before their sensors. "They're transmitting to their fleet," Lynn reported, sending some kind of warning. Reed studied the new tactical display. The ship's capabilities were represented in ways he had never seen before, showing potential attack vectors and defensive configurations that defied conventional space combat doctrine. "What are we looking at?" he asked Barnes. "It's a weapons system unlike anything we've encountered," she replied, her eyes wide as she interpreted the data. "It doesn't just target ships, it targets space itself." Reed made his decision. "Navigation. Bring us out of the asteroid field. Set course directly for the Vorus fleet approaching Earth." The Thunderchild moved with renewed purpose, its engines emitting a strange harmonic that resonated through the hull. The pursuing Vorus ships fired immediately, but their weapons scattered harmlessly against the reconfigured defenses. "Return fire," Reed ordered. "Let's test what this system can do." The weapons officer hesitated before the unfamiliar controls, then pressed the primary firing sequence. Instead of the energy beam they had used before, the Thunderchild released a pulse that expanded outward in concentric rings. Where these rings intersected the nearest Vorus ship, the space around the vessel distorted. The enemy ship stretched and compressed, as though seen through a warped lens before its systems failed completely. "What did we just do to them?" Reed asked, stunned. "We altered the space-time fabric around their ship," Barnes explained, studying the readings. "Their systems can't function when the physical laws they operate under are manipulated." The remaining Vorus ships retreated, transmitting urgent messages to their main fleet. The Thunderchild pursued at speeds it had never before achieved, the new drive system functioning with perfect efficiency. In Earth orbit, the final battle was already underway. Dozens of Vorus warships hammered the planet's defenses, while the remaining Earth vessels fought desperately to protect their home. The arrival of the transformed Thunderchild sent a ripple of confusion through the enemy fleet. "All Earth vessels, clear a corridor through the center of the Vorus formation," Reed transmitted. "We need a clear line to their command ship." As the Thunderchild approached, the Vorus recognized the threat. Their entire fleet pivoted to focus on the single Earth vessel, unleashing a barrage that would have destroyed any conventional ship instantly. "Morris shield at maximum," Barnes called out as energy washed over the hull. "Holding at 95%. The Thunderchild drove relentlessly forward, its weapons systematically disrupting the space around key Vorus vessels. Ships that weren't destroyed outright found their systems malfunctioning in unpredictable ways, their carefully coordinated attack dissolving into chaos. At the heart of the bridge, Reed activated a final sequence that Barnes had discovered in the awakened system. The entire ship resonated with energy as a field began to form around the Vorus fleet. "What's happening?" Lynn asked as the enemy ship suddenly froze in position. "Temporal disruption field," Barnes explained. "We've created a bubble where time moves at a fraction of normal speed." They're essentially frozen from our perspective. As Earth's remaining defenders regrouped, Reed opened a channel to the trapped Vorus command ship. "This is Captain James Reed of the Thunderchild. Your fleet is disabled. Your options are retreat or destruction." Hours later, as the Vorus fleet limped away from Earth under the watchful eye of the transformed warship, Reed stood alone in his quarters, reading the final pages of Morris's journal that Barnes had decoded. "I have seen what they can become," Morris had written. "The visitors showed me not just their present but their future. The ship I designed isn't just a weapon. It's a message across time. When they return, humanity must be ready. The Thunderchild will show them that the impossible is merely the undiscovered." Reed closed the journal and looked out at the stars. The legend had become reality, and somewhere out there, Morris's mysterious visitors waited. But now, humanity had a nightmare of its own to unleash upon any who threatened their world.